Making a garden like this can take years. The first step is to plant the seeds. So don't be put off by the instructions. Take each heading and work through it slowly, and you'll soon find that you've plenty of additions for your own garden. Now, while I go off and explore, let's hear more from Ian about how we use our memory.
Earlier in the programme we showed you how it's easier to remember some things than others. When you remembered the animals that we showed you earlier, the chances are you pulled a name out of your head. In most cases this would be a cold fact with no associated personal memories. Let's try a different type of memory. Can you remember your first trip to the zoo? Can you remember that? The first trip to the zoo often makes people think of a specific animal. Maybe it made a funny noise, or maybe you thought it looked strange or it scared you. Maybe you remember who you were with, or if the weather was good or bad. These types of memory are more personal and bring with them a whole range of other recollections, including pictures, sounds, smells and feelings. Later in the programme we'll look at other kinds of memory.
Working on your reading and writing skills can really have added benefits. For Eileen Daly, returning to learning gave her the added confidence to deal with her son's doctors. Eileen's children were key in her decision to take steps to address her literacy difficulties, and in turn they have benefited from her newly improved skills.
I have two sons. Fergal is 22 and Emmett is 18. Emmett has a rare condition, it's arthrogryposis. It was hard to deal with Emmett's doctors because they would talk in a language that a lot of lay people don't understand anyway, and they forget to come down to your level. So it would make it twice as hard for the like of me to be talking to a doctor. When I went back to education, my approach changed, that you were better able to deal with them, that you would ask them to explain a little bit better, that you had the confidence to turn around and get them to do that.
And use the right one. I've noticed the difference in the way she handles the doctors. Like, she asks them some more questions, and she understands their explanations more better.
And since I've gone back to education, I've got more involved in disability issues, and we have a group that meets once a month, and we cover a broad range of issues, fighting over the access as well. The law is today that you must get into every building and be able to get back out of it. Footpaths and doorways and steps, and as Emmett would say, "Ma, don't be always fighting."
We may give you a few more lessons. I tell her to calm down a bit, and that it can be done just by talking. She doesn't need to argue it out all the time. And she doesn't need to, like, lose her head, give it out to door people or bouncers or whatever.
I would highly recommend going back to education. It has done so much for me. It is a great achievement, and has allowed me to do so many things that I had never thought I would do, and it is an absolute brilliant idea to go back.
As we've already seen, Eileen has an action-packed life in her home, in the garden and shopping in town. The words we use to describe the actions that Eileen does are called verbs. For instance, Eileen digs, she plants, and she walks. Dig, plant and walk are the verbs in the sentences. As we've seen in other programmes, most sentences have verbs in them, and they make up the main action of the sentence when telling a story. However, we often use words that tell us a little bit more about the action that's described. So, for example, Eileen might dig slowly, plant quickly, and walk briskly. The words you put beside the verbs tell us more about what the action is. These words are called adverbs, and as the name suggests, they add something to a verb to give us more information. Let's go back to our seed packets. We see that we should sow our seeds thinly, we should firm them gently, and pick them regularly. All these words give you a better idea about the actions that are involved in sowing seeds. Most adverbs end in ly, which sounds like lee. So it's just a matter of putting this ending onto the root word to make new adverbs. So for instance, Eileen walks briskly, she digs slowly, and she plants quickly. Adverbs are a great way of giving someone a better description of the verb, and they can come before or after the action you're describing.
So we've seen how using adverbs can tell us more about what we are doing. And if you want some practical help with this, then call us on 1800 20 20 65 and we'll send you out a copy of the Read Right Now workbook. Now, if you have difficulty remembering long numbers like this, don't worry, because Ian is here now with some useful tips to improve your memory skills.
Now let's look at an aspect of memory we use every day. Say, for example, you heard something and wanted to remember it back straight away. This type of memory is called immediate memory, and you need this for things like dialing an unfamiliar telephone number. Immediate memory fills up quickly and doesn't last, but it's important for learning to read or listening to a teacher or instructor, for instance. Now let's try a second type of memory where what you learn sticks and lasts for more than a few seconds. Now, do you remember these animals we showed you at the beginning of the program? How many of them can you remember now? There's a good chance you remembered a lot of the 5 animals because you were remembering a picture for each one. Some people might have imagined the roar of a lion or the stripes of a zebra to help them remember. But if I asked you to learn another list of words, for instance, rule, law, age, and care, you might find these harder to remember because you can less easily create a mental image or sound to go with each of them. So, if you want to help your memory, it's often a good idea to use a mental image of the thing that you're learning. When Eileen tried to remember the names of plants, for instance, she probably made a mental image of the plant and linked that to the word she was learning. Try this and you'll find yourself able to remember a lot more.
It's been a really busy program this week. At the start of the show, Terry helped us with using comparatives and superlatives.
We often compare things to describe them more clearly. When we compare 2 items, we use the comparative, which is where we add ER to the end of the words. However, when you're comparing more than 2 things, you use the superlative, which is when you add EST to the end of the word.
We heard from Ian about how to improve our memory skills.
This week we learned a little bit about how memory works. Your brain can learn all sorts of different types of information, but every now and again it could do with some help, and using images can make all the difference.
We also met our learner Eileen Daly. Since returning to learning over a decade ago, she now has the confidence to attend meetings she once would have avoided.
10 years down the road I wouldn't have believed that I would be chairing a meeting today and would go to meetings and would get involved in different things, and that it's a great achievement, I suppose.
And we looked at reading seed packets and using adverbs.
Today we looked at seed packets and the type of information you find in them. At first glance, packets might look confusing, but the information is generally the same, whether the seeds are flower or vegetable seeds. So getting to know how they're organised and what information is under different headings will help you to find out what you want very quickly. We also looked at adverbs, which are words which tell you more about a verb. Most adverbs end in ly, which sounds like lee. So it's just a matter of putting this ending onto the root word of the verb to make an adverb. For example, slow becomes slowly and brisk becomes briskly.
Next week we'll be looking at writing messages, meeting a new learner from Dublin, Sandra Mooney, and we'll be giving you tips on how to use prefixes and opposites. So until then, goodbye.